So what is up, guys? Nick here, helping you to master your technology. Should you buy the iPhone XS in 2021? Now, really quickly, the price. You can get this phone right now for right around the $300 to $400 price range. That's a substantial value over the original launch price of around $1,000. Depending on where you're at, it might cost more or less. In addition, there are other iPhones in this price range, like the iPhone SE 2020 that might even be cheaper than this. In addition, you could also get the iPhone XR around this price and pay, or you could pay a little bit more and get a more modern iPhone 11. So the choice is really up to you, but let's talk about the pros and cons about the iPhone XS. We're gonna go ahead and begin with the display. So this one has a Super Retina OLED display here. So it was the second time Apple brought an OLED to their phones. They brought it with the iPhone X. So they've been doing OLED for around 4 years now. So a very nice display. It gets that same 625 nits as the current iPhone 12. So it's plenty bright enough. And I gotta say, I really like that it has 3D touch. It's just very fast to go ahead and punch into things. The bezels are not also super thick either, because the XS didn't have the same type of bezels as, you could say, the iPhone XR. So the bezels are pretty acceptable. While they're not the thinnest like the iPhone 12 anymore, they are still pretty acceptable here for this panel. But I gotta say, definitely a pro. The display looks good in media. It looks good in overall quality. However, the notch is still something we're waiting to see be removed. I would say it's definitely a pro still for the iPhone XS in the display, because a lot of iPhones have LCD displays. This one has an OLED at a pretty cheap price at this current time. The second pro is the build quality. Now this phone does have glass on the rear and the front, but it's a pretty sturdy glass. It's Gorilla Glass front and back, and it's wrapped around a stainless steel frames. Not a lot of phones give you stainless steel. I've been saying that for a while, and this one right here does give you a very nice overall build around the edges with the stainless steel. So that's definitely a pro. The next pro of the iPhone XS is the ergonomics and the size. It does have these curved edges around the bottom, still a flat display, but it's a very comfortable to hold phone at 5.8 inches. Some people were already saying this is too big, but they might have stretched it too far with the 6.1 across the board. Now, some people will say, no, Nick, I love the 6.1, but for some, 5.8 was the perfect size, and I would say it's definitely a pro. It's a pretty good size phone without being too small, without being too large. It's very easy to operate. Now, the fourth thing that's a pro about this phone is the chipset. It has the Apple A12, which is still a screamer. This is a 7nm chipset. It came out in 2018, but Apple was so ahead of their time. There's phones launching today with 8nm chipsets. So you can just see they are mid-rangers, but you can just see that Apple was way ahead of the curve here with the A12, and it still screams for a CPU. I have no issues with the performance here. This phone did give 4 gigs of RAM, so that helped it, hum along just fine here on this phone. And it does have Apple's own GPU with 4-core graphics, so gaming just amazing because it's all optimized to work perfectly with iOS. So I gotta say, the performance very strong, definitely a pro for this phone right here. Now the fifth pro is software. Now if we go ahead and we go back and we're going to go down here to software update, you'll see I'm on the latest iOS 14.4.1. 14.5 is on its way, but this phone is still getting update. Not a lot of phones, continue to get many updates for a long time like this device. There are some Android phones that do it, but this one right here is going to be updated further than some of the people that were launching phones or some of the phones that came out in this year. The next pro is the rear video can do 4K 60p video. Now that's something some budget phones still don't give you this to this day. So there are pros of buying a yesteryear phone. 4K at 60. This is a strong level of video quality for your phone. In addition, this phone could also do 4K at 24 FPS. You don't see a lot of Android phones doing 24 FPS. So if you're into the film like video, you can do 4K at 24. In addition to that, you can do the Smart HDR, which came standard with the iPhone XS and XS Max. It does just basically give you a better photo every time you take a photo, because it just kind of knows how to algorithmically change it for the dynamic range to just be a very beautiful shot right here. So we'll take a picture of the Lambo right here, and you could see it just kind of does a good job in pretty much everything you do. So the next pro is Face ID, and the reason why Face ID is a pro is because it's basically the same operation and biometrics of the latest phone. So you're not left behind at all here on Face ID for the iPhone XS. This one right here does not give you a Touch ID scan or anything like that, and we are looking for the return of that, I think, on the next iPhones, maybe an in-display, but Face ID still feels modern even though it's on this older phone. So definitely nice there. The next pro is this phone supports wireless and fast charging. So you get this glass back, which does let you place it on a mat and it will charge. Also, it can do fast charging at 15 watt. You do need a compatible charger, however. So those are my pros with this phone, but there are many cons as well. This phone is not perfect in every area, and we're going to discuss what those cons are. So the first con is that the design on this phone, it's just starting to look a little bit dated. Not the front, the back of it though. You can tell this phone has been out for a while. When you see the iPhone 10, it's kind of like when the iPhone 10 came out and you were looking at the iPhone 5. This phone is starting to look like the older iPhone on the back, not the front. The front still looks almost identical to any other iPhone, but I would just say the back is starting to look a little bit dated here. The second con of this phone is that the screen is not the brightest in sunlight. I found the 625 nits and it does boost up a little bit, but there's just the newer iPhones, especially the Pro model, which was designed to replace this one, definitely got a lot brighter. The iPhone 11 Pro and the 12 Pro series in sunlight. In addition, competing Samsung phones crank the nits way up in sunlight. The third con of this phone is the front-facing camera is not the greatest. On the front, you have a 7 megapixel camera that's only capable of 1080p 60 video recording. Now, I do think it's a really good one for social media and photos. However, where it falls apart is when you're trying to do a 4K 60 video and you're trying to do the front video and you're trying to put it together, you got to use only the rear camera because the front camera can't do 4K. So you have much more of a pro experience on the 11 Pro, 12 Pro, even the 12 or the 11 because you can do 4K on the front and the rear. Now, the next thing is the battery life. That's a con of this phone. Now, this phone right here doesn't have the maximum battery capacity you're going to want from an iPhone. I didn't use this phone much because I wasn't able to make it through a day very well. I was getting through the day and I was finishing with lower percentages than I like. So I was typically on the max phone because it always provides a little bit more battery life. This one is in the 2000 milliamp hour range, closer to 3000, but still this phone right here, not the best on battery life. Con 5, the resale value is starting to tank on this phone. It started at $1,000 and for 300 something right now, it's starting to go down. So if you buy this now, say you buy this now, you keep it for a couple years, the 10S is going to not net you much of any return on a trade-in or a sale. Con 6, you're buying into older technology in a market that's already so saturated that you likely could get a phone that's better than this for around the same price, especially if you look on the Android side. But if you're staying with Apple, it's kind of tricky. It's a little bit confusing because you can get the SE 2020, you can get the 11 for a little bit more, or the 10R. And my next con is this phone lacks the Qualcomm modems. So I always found this to not be great when it comes to reception out and about on the go. Its 4G LTE wasn't that strong either compared to the Samsung phones of the time. I think it was the S10. It was like the S9 or S10 of this time. Let me know down below which one was competing with this one. I kind of forgot that already, but definitely this wasn't the best, you know, in terms of this area. Not saying it's bad. People are going to be like, I was able to make calls. Yeah, not saying you're not, but I'm just saying my Samsung phones had much more bars. Apple has improved this. This is no longer a complaint anymore. They have fixed this stuff. They have Qualcomm modems on the latest iPhones, but this one right here wasn't the best here. And lastly, it's a debatable one, but this phone doesn't support 5G. 5G has been, I think, overhyped. However, you know, it's still something for the future. So if you buy this right now, 4G LTE is an older technology. You're basically putting your money into older technology. However, again, if you find this at a cheap price, you're not really throwing your money away because you're getting a lot of premium spec. And if 5G isn't that widespread yet, you still have good usage out of this phone. So that's it for me for the iPhone XS. Should you buy it here in 2021? And the answer to that is it depends. If you resonated more with the pros and you're like, okay, I can live with those cons, go ahead and pick it up. But if you're like, no, bro, those cons are just too much for me, I'm gonna look elsewhere, then don't get this one. If you found this video helpful, entertaining, informing, do me a favor, click that like button for me, subscribe if you haven't already. Nick here, I will catch you all in the next episode. Thank you very much for watching, and peace.